They would say things like, well, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They would ask me opinion questions and congratulate me that my opinion was correct.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Ignition Path podcast. My name is Kyle Gooden, and I'll be your host today. Real quick, before we get into our guest, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And if you hear something, and this episode is going to be very, very interesting. It's everybody's worst nightmare. So if you hear something of this and it triggers something into you to share this with someone who may be in this situation, please don't hesitate to do so, because my guest, Jeffery Diskovic, has an incredible story of advocacy, of falsely accused. And actually, let me just stop right there. Let me just let him explain everything to you, because I do not want to misspeak about everything that he's been through. And then, of course, what he's doing now to help the falsely accused. Jeffery, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. So I'm an attorney and I run a nonprofit organization called the Jeffery Diskovic Foundation for Justice. Our mission is to free people who are wrongfully imprisoned and to pursue policy changes aimed at preventing that from happening. So far, we have freed 14 people. We helped pass 3 laws and then another 6 as key members of the National Coalition Group. It could happen to you. I have a master's degree in criminal justice. My thesis is written on wrongful conviction, cause, and reform. And I started this advocacy work because I survived 16 years of wrongful imprisonment myself. I was arrested at 16 for a murder and rape which I did not commit. The year was 1990. It was in Peekskill in Westchester County, so the suburbs. It was middle class. It was ethnically diverse. And I lost the trial shortly after turning 17, and I spent 16 years in prison, ultimately being exonerated through further DNA testing, so hence my life being about what it is. And as we'll unfold in the course of the podcast, there's several crossovers into entrepreneurship, in terms of the law firm I run, and then public speaking. I co-own a game, Recharge Beyond the Bars reentry game, and then of course the nonprofit organization, which shares a lot of characteristics with actually starting and running a business.
Fantastic. So just real quick, so is that in California where this happened?
No, it's in New York.
New York. I apologize.
Sure.
You mentioned the area and I didn't know what that
Mhm.
was. So yeah, when it comes to the 6 laws that you've helped get on the books, is that a federal, national, state? Like what level is that?
Sure. That's at the state level. So to put some color to it, so specifically, we helped pass a law that mandated that the police have to record custodial interrogations. That, in view of the fact that wrongful convictions caused by coerced false confessions, that it's been 29% of the cases. So we help. So videotaping from beginning to end is the best way of preventing wrongful convictions caused by coerced false confessions. We help pass that. Misidentification, which is a leading cause of wrongful conviction, and the DNA proven wrongful convictions coming in at 71%. We help to codify into law some of the best practices for running the most accurate procedure. DNA database expansion. So I was exonerated through DNA testing, which identified the actual perpetrator. They took the crime scene DNA evidence, which didn't match me, put it in the data bank, and it matched the actual perpetrator, whose DNA was there because left free while I was doing time for his crime. He killed a second victim 3.5 years later. So we put that DNA in the database. It matched him because it was there because of his subsequent crime. Then in addition to that, we helped improve discovery reform in New York. So discovery reform pertains to sharing information between the prosecution and the defense. So previously, the way that it happened is the prosecution would they would only have to turn over evidence that they thought was going to either be helpful to the defense or prior testimony or witness statements of witnesses that they were planning to call. And then they would typically turn over the documents like on the eve of a hearing, on the eve of a trial, which meant that wasn't really enough time to investigate, to interview witnesses. So now it has to be turned over automatically within the first month of arrest, and any delay after that requires a court order. So we took New York from having one of the worst discovery laws to, one of the best. We have passed the Commission on Prosecutor Conduct, so it's an independent oversight board, the first in the country where it could investigate allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. And of course, we hope that it will have the deterrent effect on deterring rogue prosecutors from committing misconduct. And then we helped pass a bill in Pennsylvania pertaining to automatic expungement. So if someone's charged with a crime and the charges were either dismissed or they were found not guilty, then it would be automatically expunged from their record. So we are currently pushing policy in New York, Pennsylvania, and California. So in terms of what we're currently doing in New York, when they passed the bill mandating custodial interrogations, they unfortunately carved out exceptions for homicide, sex offenses, and drug cases, and we want there to be no exceptions. We'd like to ban law enforcement from using deception in interrogations because recognizing that that's inherently coercive. And then there's the Youth Interrogation Act. So it would give 16, 17-year-olds, kids younger than that, a non-waivable right to counsel. So they would have to speak to an attorney to explain their rights to them before they could decide that they wanted to waive them and speak to the police. In Pennsylvania, that's one of 12 states that does not currently compensate exonerees, so we're trying to pass that. And in California, we are working on building support for the Commission on Prosecutor Conduct. So we want to export the law from New York to California and, hope from there that the rest of the country would follow.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, that's everybody's worst nightmare when it comes to falsely accused or
wrongful conviction.
Children, 16-year-old, we all know that the male brain and child's brains don't really even develop until like 25. So it's one of those things where that coercion and that getting them to falsely admit to things because of whatever pressure that they're under or what have you, they just don't understand the consequences of the words they're saying because they can't future think because of that. And so to have some laws in place makes a lot of sense. I mean, you got convicted when you were 16. So whatever type of interrogation you had, maybe you can share a little bit about some of the things that back in 1990 still not as prevalent as today, hopefully with changes and whatnot, what they did to manipulate you or to get you to say stuff that really wasn't something that you could have had an idea of what you were saying per se because of just the development of your brain. And that's a physiological thing. That's not opinion, that's physiological. So tell me more about that part of it and what the law is going to do to provide so then there's someone in the room. Like, I can't believe that there wasn't a parent allowed to be in the room with that. Was that happening? Or I guess that's another question I have before we get into entrepreneur stuff. Like what you said just started throwing up red flags all over the place for me. Like, why wasn't, like, I'm a paramedic. When we have, unless it's implied consent of medical life or death, I have to have a parent present when I make decisions or when we make decisions for a medical treatment. If it's implied where their life is on the line or something like that, then we can have implied consent and we act on as if, I think the concept is, or not the concept, but the wordage is, with due regard. If anybody, the majority would say, hey, yes, you need to take medical action to help this person, whatever age you are, parents or not, then you do it and then share the information later. But when it comes to policing and interrogation and detective work, I guess speak a little bit about that with the background before we get into the entrepreneur stuff, just because I'm interested in that area.
Sure. Yes. So I was arrested when I was 16 and for the murder and rape, and that was based on a coerced false confession. I did turn 17 by the time the trial started, which I lost. But to focus on the confession for a second. So the background was I got on the police radar originally because the police interviewed some of the students in the high school, and some of them told the police they might want to speak with me because I was quiet. I was to myself. I didn't quite fit in. So that got me on the police radar. I was an emotional teenager. This was my first brush with death, and I had an emotional reaction. And the police thought that was suspicious, given that I barely knew the victim. She was in two of my classes as a freshman, one as a sophomore. I knew her name, she knew mine. That was really the extent of it. We weren't even really on a high-buy basis. I came from a single parent household. My father was never involved in my life in any aspect. So that intersected with the good cop, bad cop technique where one officer pretended to be my friend, the other one was more aggressive. I began to look up to the officer who was pretending to be my friend as a father figure. Prior to being a teenager, I dreamed about being a police officer when I grew up. And so that intersected with this next technique that they use. So there was a period of 6 weeks where I had interaction with the police, and it was they kind of played like a cat and mouse game with me, in which half the time they would speak to me like I was a suspect, and when they would push too hard, I'd become frightened and want to get away from them. Jeff, as this junior detective helper theme was developed. They would say things like, well, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They would ask me opinion questions and congratulate me that my opinion was correct. So eventually they got me to agree to take a lie detector test. They said, look, we have some new information that's in the police file. We want to share that with you. That's going to allow you to be more helpful to us. First, though, you have to take and pass a polygraph. So the next day, rather than report to the high school, I went to the police station. So my mother and grandmother thought I was in school, so they did not call around looking for me. But they drove me from Peekskill across county lines by car, 40 minutes away to the town of Brewster, which was in Putnam County, which meant that I wasn't able to leave anymore on my own. I was totally dependent upon the police. There were three police officers that came with me from Peekskill, and then there was the polygraphist, who was the Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, but he was dressed like a civilian. He never identified himself as law enforcement. He never read me my rights. I didn't have an attorney present. They didn't give me anything to eat the entire time I was there. And unless I asked for a lawyer, they're not obligated to provide one. And at 16 years old, you're considered to be an adult for purposes of deciding to waive your rights and speak to the police without a lawyer. So I didn't understand the 4-page brochure which they gave me, which explained how the polygraph worked, because it had a lot of big words in it that I didn't understand. But I figured, well, I'm there to help the police. So what does it matter? Let's just get on with it. And from there, he put me in a small room. He gave me countless cups of coffee. It seems clear that the purpose of that was to get me nervous. And then from there, he launched into his third-degree tactics. So he raised his voice at me. He invaded my personal space. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. As each hour passed, my fear increased in proportion to the time. And then at the end, he said, what do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test result that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it. And at that point, the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and told me that the other officers were going to harm me, that he was holding them off, but that he couldn't do so any longer, that I had to help myself. Then he added, look, just tell them what they want to hear. You can go home afterwards. You're not going to be arrested. Being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, I wasn't thinking about the long term. I was just concerned with my safety in the moment. I was in fear of my life. The fact that I didn't know where I was, no one else knew where I was either, loomed quite large. There was this push-pull dynamic, the possibility of harm, and on the other hand, this false life preserver he threw me. I took the out which he offered, and I made up a story based on the information which they gave me in the course of the interrogation. By the time it was all said and done, I had collapsed on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. Obviously, I was arrested. My interrogation was not videotaped. It was not audio taped. There was no signed confession. It was just the cop's word for it. And when they came to court, they left the threat and false promise out of their testimony. And the last point I want to quickly make is, while adults have given coerced false confessions, particularly vulnerable populations are people with mental health issues and youth, which I was 16.
Right. So this new law has at least protected that interrogation.
So yeah, for the crimes for which the police are mandated to record it. I mean, we are trying to pass an additional law, which would I mentioned before that when they passed the law, they made exceptions for homicide, sex offenses, and drug cases. So we're trying to get rid of those exceptions. So we want the whole process to be, in every scenario, we want it to be videotape. This way we can be clear, is someone being coerced? Are they not? What's the objective record of who said what, when, what context? It actually makes for better evidence and it protects honest cops from false allegations of coercion. So it's really a win-win
It's a win-win, and
scenario.
that's what body cams are for that. Too. Now we've seen a lot of things happen, and unfortunately bad with body cams, but we've also seen some proof that body cams have saved the whichever one, save the false allegations from either side. So body cams and videotaping, I think, it's like, where can you go nowadays? Like, you walk around my house, there's at least 5 cameras that'll capture you. It's like there's
Right.
cameras everywhere. Like, driving down driving in town and stopping at a stoplight, they can videotape you. So, like, this makes zero sense to not have videotapes as a mandatory, no matter what happens, a mandatory thing. So when either side falsely accuses either one, you can go back to the tape and you can find out whether that's while they're walking into the police department, whether that's being interrogated, whether that's when they get apprehended. I think videotaping is a very important thing, and hopefully this law that you're dealing with is something that will implement that in the places that were prior to falling through the cracks. So now, okay, so thanks so much for explaining that, and there's no words to describe the feeling when you talk about your experience, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. But fast forward, you were able to be exonerated through DNA evidence, and thank God for that. I mean, so many things have been helped with science, and that's a great thing. Cases solved just as much as cases that were falsely accused being exonerated. So that's great on both sides, and that you're an advocate for that. Now let's talk about a little bit about how, when you got out, what year was that? And then
It
when
was
you decide to start, becoming an advocate, and then realize, okay, there is, I struggle too with, I do mental health for first responders for, as a paramedic and going through my own issues. And I have a course that I want to monetize and, have people buy my course to get training, and so there is that struggle of, okay, I'm an advocate for what I believe in, but I also need to put food on the table and provide for my family. So when that entrepreneurial decision came about with you, like, talk a little bit about that after you got out and started doing the advocacy and whatnot.
Sure. So I was released in 2006. So I was in prison from 17 to 32, from spanning from years 1990 to 2006. So the world was much different when I was released. GPS, internet, cell phones hadn't been created. Culture is different. Cities and towns look different. So I very much felt like I was in a parallel world, a place that I didn't belong in. It was awkward when I met up with my extended family because the overwhelming majority of them never came to see me, so I knew who they were when I'd see them because I had memories from when I was young, but I was a different person now, and so were they. Had to deal with the psychological after effects of my experience. So for about 6 years, I saw mental health professionals 4 times a week. There was a social stigma. You were in prison wrongfully for 16 years, but you were there for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on you? Is it safe to be alone someplace with me? It was definitely lonely. I was always passed over for gainful employment, so I lacked stability of housing. At one point, I was a couple of weeks from going to a homeless shelter. But when I was released, I spoke off the cuff for like 2.5 hours at a press conference, and everything I had ever wanted to say but could never get anyone to hear me all came out. And just when I thought that I was finished, another thought came, and then another thought came, and eventually all that time passed by. And so a light bulb kind of went off at that moment, that I thought, look, I could be an advocate, and without necessarily being a lawyer. I had read while I was in prison that some people, when they were exonerated, that they hit the speaking circuit. So I was like everyone, I was released with nothing. New York State does allow you to seek compensation, but you have to hire a lawyer and go through the legal process. It took 5 years before I was compensated, but I had to put food on the table because I was released with nothing. So the entrepreneurial aspect of it came in that, I was as an individual advocate. So firstly, in terms of my speaking career, I was doing that off of a professional speaker model. So, I was getting paid to go places and speak, and I established what the what the minimum amount would be, and then other things that would go with it. So if it was more than 2.5 hours in any one direction, then automatically whichever vendor was hiring me would have to pay for the hotel and the transportation. And if I'm staying overnight, that means if there's meals involved, that's all separate and apart from the honorarium. So that part of it was entrepreneurial. And then also I did catch on at a weekly newspaper that had just started like a month or two before me. They wanted to interview me just as a subject matter, but I started talking about all these different justice reform issues, and then they had to call me back and say, well, wait a minute, our time's up. We didn't really talk about the story. So we went back another day, and I interviewed them, and they gave me an opportunity to write an article for pay. And I figured, well, if I knock it out the box, maybe they'll allow me to do another one, and I keep it going. So I parlayed that into being a weekly columnist for 5 years. And so between my byline, the articles, and also trading privacy for awareness by doing media interviews and ultimately new media, that helped to drive some of the speaking engagements that I was getting. So I was kind of building my brand with that, and then also I was regularly meeting with elected officials, and I would always have like a post speech analysis. I had a manager at the time. This went great. This was good. Do more of that. This didn't play so well. Skip this. So I was always getting better, getting better. So after about 5 years, I was compensated, and I decided to take some of the money and start the Jeffery Diskovic Foundation for Justice. So I continued the advocacy work as an individual, but being involved in freeing people and continuing the policy work. But again, from a nonprofit, so that brought an additional layer of credibility. So we'll get into the organization itself in a second and that crossover. But continuing on with the entrepreneurial, aside from that, well, let me say this: that after a certain amount of time, I became not satisfied with sitting in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to sit at the defense table. I wanted to represent some of the clients, make some of the arguments. Hence, going to law school, getting a law degree, a law license. Before that, I had gotten a scholarship to finish the bachelor's. Then I decided to get a master's degree in criminal justice. My thesis written on wrongful conviction, cause, and reform, because I figured that would help me to be a better advocate. Then I became an attorney, and so the idea was that I would copy off of like what say the Innocence Project. So Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld had created the Innocence Project, but then separate and apart from that, they had a civil rights law firm. So about 90% of the clients that are exonerated through the Innocence Project, they become clients of the civil rights firm. So one feeds the other, and I figured, why not do the same? So having the law license, so I have a law firm. I'm a sole practitioner, but any of the people that we exonerate, I'm able to help them get compensation on the back end. So I partner with more experienced lawyers in terms of doing that. I still speak, and I donate a percentage of that to the foundation. But then also, I had met Leslie Robinson, who was a creator of Recharge Beyond the Bars reentry game, which facilitates formerly incarcerated people with reconnecting with their friends and family through icebreaker questions. So she had already developed the game, and she showed it to me in my office, and we played, and I saw how that would, I wish that I had that game when I first came home. So I decided to invest into that. That's a for-profit endeavor, just with doing some good at the same time. So that was kind of my way of giving back to people when I was incarcerated, and then the people that I met that are on parole, that did their time and they're committed to living crime-free lives. And so I wanted to help provide a tool by investing into the game. So those are some of my crossovers.
That's amazing that's such angst and you came out exonerated, and I'm sure there was some anger and some bitterness, but for you to be able to decipher that, and then sounds like it was more of a slow roll into the, not, of course you came out and you wanted to, hey, I want to help people, but to get to the point where you're actually doing it just seems like it. How many years did that take? when it came to when you had the idea and then now you're actually truly helping someone, and then the years it takes for you to get to all these other things? Like, what was the timeline for this?
So I was released in 2006. So it took 5 years before I got compensated. So that's when I started the organization. Before that, my advocacy was just speaking, writing, media, and meeting with the electeds. So, and when I finally was compensated, I put some of the money into the organization. And then I graduated law school. So I started law school in 2017. So by that point, I was home already for 11 years. So graduated in 2019. Got admitted to the bar in 2020. And look, part of the idea of becoming a lawyer was in pursuit of the dream of exonerating others, but also earning money through helping people get compensated. So, like you said, you have to earning money and earning a living is part of life. And while money is not everything, it is an important tool, and it gives you freedom and options and ability to help people and do things. So that definitely was part of the idea. So, in a nonprofit setting, I see some of the crossovers as being you have to have a board, to get 501(c)(3) status. So, picking the right people. And I went through several iterations of board members, switching different people out, until I have, where I am now. So that's part of it. And making strategic, personnel decisions, hiring people, unfortunately letting them go, developing promotional materials also, having a logo. So we have a paralegal and a social media person and a part-time office administrator, and I have another person that works in policy. So the idea being, having growth as your revenue will allow you to expand. In a nonprofit setting, it's not a matter of making money; it's a matter of getting. A nonprofit says that we're going to provide a service for the public good for a population that can't pay for it. We're going to raise money through alternative sources. So whether that's grant writing, or donations, we do some of both, and we provide service to people that aren't able to pay for it. But adding pieces as we're able to add, and with a view to it being sustainable. I mean, no one wants to come work at a dream job and then be done at the end of the year because you didn't raise enough money. So all that's part of it. And being a face of an organization, that's also part of it. So I like to try to be involved in all things wrongful conviction, just being tied to the cause, as being an advocate in that. So those are some of the similarities also.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, real quick, let people know how to get a hold of you. When it comes to your perfect client and whatnot, or the people that may have somebody that they feel is falsely accused, how they get a hold of you, how they start this process of what you do to help them not only on the inside of conviction, but on the outside when they come out. So what is all the information that you can provide? And of course, it'll all be in the show notes. Jeffrey will send me everything, and it'll all be in the show notes. But go ahead and verbally say it in just case somebody's listening or watching, and we can and cover that before we wrap up.
Sure. So there's our website, www.deskovic, deskovic.org. There is a web form there, so you can email me through that. People can keep up with us on social media, on Instagram, Deskovic Foundation, on Facebook, Jeffery Diskovic. I have my personal page, which is public, and I have the public figure page also. So I just too many people want to keep up with me, so I copy over one page to the next. And of course, the organization has our Facebook page there as well. And people can email. We send out questionnaires to people. I mean, right now we're just able to have cases just in New York. It is my ultimate dream to expand, to have a chapter of the organization in each state and ultimately in each country. I really see this as a worldwide problem. Imagine if there were 25,000 people that were willing to help free innocent people by donating $3 to $5 a month on a recurring monthly basis. There is the crowdfunding page, Patreon. So you type in Patreon and Deskovic Foundation. You can sign up, help me get the word out there in terms of that. But other ways people can help is, look, if you work at at a school or other institution that brings speakers in, you can suggest it to them that they reach out to me in terms of that. Certainly, I do have other lawyers that practice other areas of law. I have colleagues, so if you have legal needs, even beyond what I do, I can connect you with credible lawyers that'll do a good job. And if that's another entrepreneurial aspect of it, I mean, those lawyers do give a referral fee as well. If you've been exonerated, I mean, certainly we can help you get compensated that way. If you work at a corporation and they do corporate philanthropy, I mean, put us on their radar. My biggest need, as I wrap up, my biggest need is that I kind of went from worst to first somewhat artificially, just in terms of socioeconomic status through the lawsuit. So I didn't make it in business 10, 20, 30 years, and now I have a cachet of people that I can turn back to. So I need third parties that can connect me to people in their network that have capacity that this cause may speak to. It's a soft sell. Here's who I am. Here's my credentials. Here's my body of work. Here's what the organization's mission is. Here's what we've gotten done. Here's the metrics that we could hit if we had enough funding. Here's how many cases we could screen, how many we could go to field investigation, how many we could take to court, how many we could ultimately win. And look, is this a cause that appeals to you or not? I do appreciate your time. So just that would be how the dialogue would go. And if you like what you've seen here today and you would like to see a little bit more, there is a documentary short out about me. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Conviction, and it's about my life post exoneration and my advocacy work.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll put that. I'm not sure if I can probably put it if you have a link to
I
to
have
the
a link. I
yeah,
have a link to all those things that,
yeah,
yeah.
you'll send me an email with all that stuff, and then we can have our watchers and listeners just click on that, and it'll automatically most likely go into their Amazon Prime account to watch it. So I'll be looking that up for sure myself. But Jeffrey, it is a pleasure to meet you. The first time we met on that introductory call, we spoke quite a bit about everything, and I mean, my background and that I have advocacy for the mental health side of first responders, and I can't even imagine what the mental health load of when you meet your maker and you realize that you just coerced a 16-year-old to falsely accuse. Like, I couldn't even imagine what that could happen to those detectives and how they're dealing with that now. Is there forgiveness involved? Have you had contact with those people ever
All
since
right,
then?
so yeah. So the closest I came in touch with them is, I mean, I was sitting across the table with them, and that was during depositions in the course of the lawsuits that were filed. I haven't spoken to them other than that. I mean, you're not supposed to communicate. I mean, I'll share with you, being a human being, when I sat across from the officer who, had pretended to be my friend, I kind of broke decorum and, you know, because he waved at me and smiled, like if we were like that was my old high school or college buddy, you know, um, and I remember just saying, you cost me 16 years of my life, he said, he didn't cost me, he didn't cost me anything. I was angry my first week of being home, but I realized that I felt like the anger was destroying me, and so, I decided I had to let that go. And my lines of reasoning were that I want to enjoy my life as much as I can, and I can't do that and simultaneously be angry or bitter. I've lost so much already as is. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? And if I was to be angry or bitter, it's not like I'd be adversely affecting the people that had a hand in what happened to me. I would really be the only loser in that scenario. And the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take that energy that I feel and I channel it into the advocacy work. I do make sense of what happened to me in looking at it in a kaleidoscopic type of way. So I think I went through everything in order to do the work that I'm doing now. This is my place in the world. So I have my purpose, and with that, I have I have inner peace.
Fantastic. Well, with that being said, I'm so happy that you found that space and it didn't destroy you, and that you're doing good for the world that needs this part of it, and I appreciate you coming on the Ignition Path podcast and sharing your story. When I first started this podcast, I never thought I would be in front of someone who was falsely accused and then exonerated, and having that as part of their life and part of their story. But here we are, and the fact that you've come on the other side of it and have done you're forgiven, and you've moved on with your life, and you've not let it ruin you or kill you, and you put that energy into doing good for the best. It's just, it's sainthood level, right? So I
Yeah,
mean,
I consider it to be, and I consider the work that I do to be, to be civil rights work and of the
yeah,
same spirit as civil rights leaders that have come before me. And we all, in all professions, we all stand on the shoulders of giants.
yeah, exactly. So once again, thank you so much for coming on, Jeffrey. I appreciate it. If any of you listen out there have, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow. If anything you've heard, you need to share this with someone, please don't hesitate to send this to them. Hopefully it'll be very helpful for you if you have someone, a loved one or a friend that you feel is in that arena of issues. You can reach out to Jeffrey. I'm sure no matter what state it is, at least you can guide them properly.
Sure,
Laws
I can
in
guide
both are
people.
going to be
Yes,
different, but sounds like you're trying to progress it through the states and become a federal thing. So,
correct.
at least you can give some honest, advice if they contact you and whatnot.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. All right, thank you very much.
Yep. Take care and talk
You
to you
too.
later.
Absolutely. Okay, bye.
Thank you for listening to Ignition Path, fueling the entrepreneurial fire.